the leader of the Cuban Revolution, Fidel Castro, took power in Cuba in 1959. Invited by the American Newspaper Publishers Association, Castro visited Washington and New York. Wherever the charismatic Castro went, he was followed by crowds of spectators. The Americans liked Castro, and he liked them. He often told his followers, "We have never met Americans like these. Until now, we knew them as robbers and colonialists." However, American President Dwight David Eisenhower did not like Castro or his political plans. He was convinced that the revolution would harm the economy of the United States and its imperialist goals in Latin America. The heart of Castro's revolutionary program was agricultural reform. Corresponding laws were introduced in May 1959, and in June, the expropriation of American companies that owned large parts of Cuba began. Cubans compensated the United States, but American investors complained that the compensation was insufficient. The new Cuban agrarian law, which favored small farmers, limited land ownership to 40 hectares per person, making the land state property. Economic and political relations between the United States and Cuba deteriorated. Cuba continued expropriations, targeting American investors and their properties, including farmland, pastures, oil refineries, and hotels. As had happened in Guatemala, the American United Fruit Company, which owned significant land in Cuba, was also affected. Castro government declared that it had expropriated 110,000 hectares of land owned by United Fruit Company. However, Cuba had only one export product, sugar, and only one export market, the United States. This made the Cuban economy very vulnerable, which the United States was well aware of. In a speech to thousands of farmers, Castro threatened to expropriate all American-owned sugar mills if Congress reduced Cuban sugar imports. He warned that if the Americans tried to force them into submission through starvation, all Yankee properties, even the nails in their shoes, would be expropriated. However, this did not make a significant impression on Washington. The United States reduced the sugar quota to 0. As a result, Cuba could no longer sell sugar to America, igniting an economic war. Cuba quickly needed to find new markets for its sugar and succeeded by reaching agreements with the communist bloc across the Atlantic. The Soviet Union and China were ready to purchase Cuban sugar. As U.S.-Cuban relations deteriorated, the bond between the Soviet Union and Cuba grew stronger. The Russians saw the conflict between Castro and Washington as an opportunity to expand their influence in the Caribbean. The Russians offered to trade their oil for Cuban sugar. Fidel Castro saw this as a good deal, and the first Soviet tanker full of crude oil arrived in Cuba. However, American oil companies Esso and Texaco and the European company Shell refused to refine the Soviet crude oil. After a warning that did not yield results, Castro expropriated the oil refineries, declared them Cuban state property, and converted the crude oil into diesel and gasoline. The American National Security Council decided on March 10, 1959, at a secret meeting in the White House to establish a new government in Cuba. Eisenhower authorized the CIA to organize, train, finance, and equip Cuban exiles with the aim of undermining Castro's revolution. The CIA initiated cooperation with Cubans who did not support the Cuban Revolution, did not like Castro, and therefore moved to America. It was important for President Eisenhower and Vice President Nixon that the existence of this force remain secret. Therefore, the training of these Cubans, who lived covertly, was conducted in Guatemala. Unmarked American planes transported Cuban exiles from the secluded OPA Laca Airport in Miami to a secret military airport in Guatemala,